Happy holidays, everyone. Welcome to Doing Business on a Holiday. I guess we have to do business every day, whether it's a holiday or not, because it's all about money. Good morning, everyone. This is 55 minutes of current and relevant business conversations on Business Morning. I'm Ini John Bekwa. We start business as usual from the global space, where oil prices slipped on Friday, but we're on track for their first weekly gain in 3 weeks after U.S. President Donald Trump and China's Xi Jinping resumed trade talks, raising hopes for growth and stronger demand in the world's two largest economies. So for the numbers this morning, it's a red. So it's down 12 cents, as about 0.2% for Brent. $65.22 is the holiday price. WTI, that's West Texas Intermediate Crude Futures, that also lost 15 cents, that's 0.2%, to $63.22 after gaining around 50 cents yesterday, Thursday. On a weekly basis, both benchmarks are on track to settle higher after falling for 2 straight weeks. Brent has advanced 2.1% this week, while WTI is trading 4% higher. The market continues to swing with news on tariff negotiations and data showing how trade war uncertainty and tariff impact are flowing through into global economy. Top exporter Saudi Arabia has cut its July crude prices for Asia to near 2-month lows, and that's a smaller price reduction than expected after OPEC Plus agreed to ramp up output by 411,000 barrels per day next month, July. The kingdom had been pushing for a bigger output hike, part of a broader strategy to win back market share and discipline over producers in OPEC Plus, which groups the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries and Allies, which includes Russia. And in Africa, the Africa Finance Corporation is asking African countries to channel the continent's 1.1 trillion dollars institutional capital into long-term infrastructure instead of short-term, low-risk assets. In its 2025 report, it says that Africa holds $4 trillion in domestic capital, but limited regulatory tools have hindered deployment. AFC cites Nigeria as a model with 22.8 trillion naira in pension assets and rising infrastructure investment backed by credit guarantees like InfraCredit. The AFC says faster reforms are needed to align savings with development goals. Nigeria's artificial intelligence sector is experiencing rapid growth, with investment projected to hit $400 million by the end of this year. This surge is largely driven by financial services industry, which is leveraging AI to enhance operations and customer experiences. According to National Information Technology Development Agency, that's NITDA, Nigeria's AI market is expected to reach $434.4 million by next year, 2026, growing at a compound annual growth rate of 44.2%. Integrated AI technologies to improve operational efficiency and offer innovative financial solutions. Similarly, we have banks that have invested in AI and predictive analytics to enhance service delivery. Nigeria's foreign exchange earnings from diaspora remittances may suffer a major blow following the passage of a new bill in the United States that seeks to impose a 3.5% tax on money transfers sent by non-citizens to recipients abroad. The provision is contained in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, a sweeping legislative package by U.S. President Donald Trump and recently passed by the U.S. House of Representatives. If enacted into law, the remittance law will apply to all international money transfers made by individuals who are not U.S. citizens, including green card holders, and temporary visa recipients. The tax is expected to be deducted at the point of transaction by banks and remittance platforms and remitted to the U.S. Treasury on a quarterly basis. Well, we do know that President Trump and his very close allies are not seeing a whole lot of themselves these days based on bills like this. But a meeting of academics and members of the private sector and representatives of the United States held here in Nigeria. It's a policy speech with the theme Toward a Robust U.S.-Nigeria Commercial and Investment Partnership. The U.S. ambassador in Nigeria, Richard Mills, he was there to clarify issues on the recently launched U.S. commercial diplomacy strategy for sub-Saharan Africa and opportunities for expanding trade and investment ties and deepening long-term mutual prosperity for the people of the United States and Nigeria. He's also assuring of a cordial relationship between both countries in spite of the recent policies by President Donald Trump, which have shown adverse effects on both the Nigerian economy and other economies in the world.
The U.S. government, the U.S. mission remains committed to fostering and encouraging exchanges between the U.S. and Nigeria. Whether those are student exchanges, whether those are international visitor leadership program exchanges that bring young leaders to the United States to meet with counterparts who are working in their fields, whether that's some of our programs that are focused on entrepreneurship or women in the STEM sector. That's still an important component of what we want to do. I have to be frank because I want to be with friends. There is, I think, a reduction ahead in the amount of funding that we will have for such programs. And that's just a reality. But the programs will continue. I'm very pleased, for instance, that LBS will be hosting a Fulbright participant, Professor Owens from a great university in Minnesota, this next academic year. We're still committed to those programs. They may not be as expansive as they once were, but they're still at the core of how we want to continue to develop people-to-people ties. I think also there is a realization in the United States that the U.S. government may be reducing funding for some of its flagship and other programs to do this. And I think there will be an effort in the private sector to pick up some of this, that we might see more scholarships, I hope, more exchange programs supported through private philanthropy in the United States, private foundations, private enterprise, to maybe make up for some of that. But I especially want to tell the bright people in this auditorium, Dean, don't walk away from the United States. Don't walk away from any exchange program that interested you. Please continue to engage with us if you're interested.
Well, that's the United States ambassador to Nigeria right there. And guess what? I have an American right here. Should we blow all the blows? Hi, Ashley.
Hi.
Ashley, good to have you in the studio, but I don't know if this is a very good time to be an American in Nigeria. President Trump is hitting us really hard, even though we saw the ambassador trying to, assure us that the relationship is still cordial, it's still on. But I mean, Nigeria depends a whole lot on diaspora remittances. Yeah. This new one is really going to hit Nigeria. I want to say I pray it doesn't go through, but who am I in the midst of things? But Ashley, let me...
It's okay. Soon you'll tell your people to allow me to collect Nigerian citizenship. So.
All right, Ashley Manuel is the Chief Operating Officer of Semicolon Africa. She's not here to talk about Nigeria and U.S. relations, so I won't put you in a hot shit. But we're talking about techpreneurship, and this is about, I just read there, the projection of AI in Nigeria. And of course, we do need the person, the skills for this. And a lot of conversation has been going on about where will these skills come from. We see a lot of people changing careers at a late time. But I guess the best would be to train the upcoming ones, But the issue of Nigeria's curriculum and how we to prepare the youth for the new reality is another thing. You've been in Nigeria, you've been in the tech space, fintech and all of that for a long time. From your observation, from school, 4 walls of the school, to reality, are we preparing the youth for tomorrow?
The answer is not as much as we should be in Nigeria. We see this, actually we started Semicolon partly because companies from tech startups, fintechs and others, to large corporates were seeing one of their biggest challenges was access to talent, and in particular tech talent. They could not find the right technical skills that they need here. But we know that's absurd because there are so many millions of young people entering the workforce in Nigeria every year who are eager for opportunities. So unfortunately, today our educational systems are not churning out the skill set that industry is demanding. There's a mismatch. And so we created Semicolon and the Techpreneurship program to help address that gap, to turn people, often young people, but not exclusively young people, sometimes mid-career people, into highly employable software engineers who actually are very well aligned with employer need, and historically over 90% of them have gotten jobs. However, we recognize we're training too many university graduates. There are too many people who have degrees in computer science from good universities in Nigeria who still have to come through our program to do an additional year.
Are you saying from your observation that perhaps in the school they have computer science on paper, but there are no practicals? Is that what's missing?
So I think it's a combination of things. We can look at curriculum. We can look at sometimes the delivery. The professors will need to continuously be upskilling
maybe the training also has to go to the professors too.
Mm-hmm. So professors, anybody who is working in any field, increasingly, but especially technology, it evolves quite quickly. So even as Semicolon, we've been running Techpreneurship program for 6 years. We can't run the same program we ran exactly 6 years ago. There's new information. So we have to continuously be updating. Just as we do, university professors, same thing. So it's around skills.
But we have a lot of government empowerment, skills acquisition programs. You know, these are supposed to empower the youth especially. Yeah. We know, for instance, there are ICT centers in 774 communities. That's the plan of the government, and we've seen a couple of them, even show them right here. Are you saying those should be infused into institutions, or there's something different that should be done?
So I think it's a combination. And the truth is, it takes a lot to build that human capital. So fundamentally, what we're talking about is human capital. And employers today, they need somebody who is strategic, who is a problem solver, who has critical thinking skills, who has the right character, lifelong learner, in addition to relevant technical knowledge and skills. So it's actually quite a lot. And there's no single program in isolation that can independently take somebody from zero to that level. So we really need to look, even though our own Techpreneurship program at Semicolon has helped to address that gap, we can take people from here to here. We're still building on an educational foundation. People have attended primary, secondary, sometimes university before they come to us. Likewise, any other program you run, you will need to be layering on other educational experience. You mentioned access to resources, if you're going to be a software engineer, you need to have access to a computer. Sounds obvious, but I have trained some computer science graduates who have mostly written code on paper, right? So we need to look holistically at those things. Each of those initiatives can be an important part of the puzzle, but none usually will do everything on its own. So you need to combine it.
Compare the scenario with the US, for instance. I know you most likely wouldn't have this kind of conversation in the US, you know, about, people are doing code on paper and all of that. So how does it work? Is it government funding these things in schools? In Nigeria now, we've seen the growth of private universities, and they are more expensive, but I want to believe they are more equipped. So how is it in the US? What are some of those things we can take from there, to make it work in Nigeria?
Yeah, and I'll start by saying the US system is also not perfect. So even in the US, people are having conversations about critical gaps in skills and how to address them. But of course, we can take learning from other parts of the world and also figure out what can we do even better or differently here. I would say it's really a combination. So we need a wide range of educational opportunities and institutions that are all working strategically toward building high quality human capital. So starting from, I mean, people will even talk about first 1,000 days in a child's existence, starting from conception, right? Nutrition of the mother, caregiving, you know, early stage nutrition, how babies are being spoken to and interacted with, sets a foundation for how their brains develop. Then through primary, secondary, we need to really look at the quality of those institutions and be innovative around using the resources that we have. And it will really probably be a combination of better, you know, good use of public sector resources, innovation in terms of delivery and approaches that make sense for this population, right? Look at things like maybe not all instruction should be in English. For example, if a child isn't speaking English at home, what are the ways we can maybe innovate, even use technology to give them good quality instruction in local languages? But looking at that primary, secondary quality, innovation, public and private sector coming together, and then continuing through tertiary, through other programs, also being mindful that today, in the past, people in maybe professional settings, they'd spend the first 20 years of their life or so learning in school, and then maybe 40 years working, and then the rest is retirement. Those days are gone. We don't, now we really, with the pace of the world of work changing and technology changing, everybody has to be a lifelong learner. So even people like me, I graduated university, well, almost 20 years ago, actually. Things have changed since I left university. And even though I had a good quality education, which I'm very grateful for, I've had to do a lot of continuous learning to be able to add as much value as I can to the work I'm doing today.
So this sounds scary, kind of, because I mean you have to keep learning. It just adds to your responsibilities to yourself if you want to remain relevant. But when we look at the trend in Nigeria, we need to be busy making money. Training and learning costs money.
Yes.
How do you combine this,
Yeah.
to have a good outcome? Because you need to remain relevant in the ecosystem anyways.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what your sector is. AI, technology has caught you everywhere you are.
So, I mean, I think there are a few things. Number one, it's just kind of like work. But if you love learning, it's not a chore, it's a joy, right? So one of the things that we work on through our own programs, and I actually think should be an outcome of our educational institutions, is really instilling that love for learning, nurturing the innate curiosity all children have. We know that young children, they're always peppering you with questions, right? Why is this? What's happening over there? There's a curiosity we all have as humans, but some people have had the experience such that their educational experience has sort of beaten that love for learning out of them. So we need to love learning, right? We can also recognize that learning doesn't, even in a professional setting, only about 10% of your learning typically is formal training. A lot of your learning is actually on the job, just doing things. So for employees, volunteering to take on some new responsibilities, to join a new team, to listen in on some meetings, that's also learning. So the time for learning doesn't always have to compete with the time for working and making money and surviving, right? They can kind of go together. So yeah, I would say, and then I think on the financing piece, that is quite important, and that's really, I think, one of our biggest challenges. So part of the reason we don't have higher quality educational options that are available to all Nigerians is just cost. Good quality education is expensive, right? And for us, we've actually done a lot of work to also innovate around the financing models. So our techpreneurship program, at least 90% of the students so far have come in on a student loan. So they actually...
Is it the NEL fund?
It's not now fund because
Okay,
we're not a university, so
Okay,
we
all
don't
right.
align with the current program, and that's relatively
Okay,
new.
okay, but the thing is, so we talk about AI as a solution, but Africa has been warned to be intentional in the adoption of AI,
Yeah.
because you cannot just adopt whatever is happening in other countries. You have to tailor make it to suit your own challenges and all of that. Do you see us following that trend? So we're writing programs. It's not just because, oh, that's what's happening in the US or the UK and all of that. In dealing with the Nigerian skills, the talent, do you see that intentionality to tailor make it for the Nigerian ecosystem or the African challenges that we have at this time?
So I think when we talk about AI, we can think about a few things. So one is the skills, as you mentioned, and generally, even those skills, the skills you need to productively engage with and then build solutions using AI today will be different from those you need 5 years from now, 10 years from now. So what we actually think quite a bit about is building those foundational, sustainable, or durable skills. So things like reasoning, problem solving, understanding technology, but not just at being able to code level, also the theoretical level and how things are evolving. And as I mentioned, the capacity to continuously learn. So if we build a workforce with a robust set of foundational skills around that, of course, things like data science as well, then we should have a workforce that it can engage productively with AI tools. But I think that there are other considerations around the question of having AI solutions that are appropriate, relevant, useful, fair for African markets. And in those cases, we think about things like governance and regulation. AI is hard to regulate, but there are some ethical conversations that do need to happen at a global level. And we need to think about who's in the room having those conversations, right? A lot of the companies at the forefront of developing AI solutions are in the US or in China. Where's Africa in that conversation? We need to think about even our beyond technologists, do we have ethicists in those conversations and so forth? We also, in my opinion, need to just think about the data that these models are being trained on. So I'll give you an example. A few months ago, I was going to speak somewhere, so I thought, let me test something out. And I asked Meta AI, what's the population of Lagos? And it told me very definitively that the population of Lagos is 16 million. And anybody who lives in Lagos knows that that's probably wrong. And in fact, a few days prior, I had been in a meeting with a few commissioners for Lagos State who had said a number that was 2 times that or more, right? A few months later, I tried again, and then it gave me a slightly better estimate, and it said it better represented the degree of uncertainty around the figure, but it was still misleading. If I didn't know anything about Lagos, I would still have a misunderstanding of the population and the nuances around measuring that number. If you ask AI, I would guess, I haven't done this recently, but based on helping my children with their homework in some years past, when they've had to do a project about the Tiv people or Igala people or some different ethnic groups in Nigeria, trying to understand our own local cultures and contexts in different parts of the country, very little credible information was available that's digitized. So if that data is not digitized, if we don't, who knows how many farmers are farming cassava in Kogi State or wherever. Cassava might be the wrong crop for Kogi State. I'm not an agriculturalist. But the point is, there's actually a lot of the primary data that is not digitized about Africa, about Nigeria. So when these models are using the digital body of knowledge to generate findings and make recommendations and generate increasingly personalized learning solutions and others, will our local context be overlooked just because there was no digital footprint to begin with?
So, I really love the example you gave, because even as journalists, we're mostly stuck with data.
Yeah.
Somebody has to put it there.
Yeah.
somebody has to be conscious of it. But I'm wondering, it would be better if it's the private sector, because if it's the public sector, perhaps there might be some political sentiments around there. But these things cost money.
Yep.
Yeah. So private sector is driven by incentives. So where do we go from here solving such a problem?
I mean, it's a great question. Last time I was here, I was actually CEO of IFINA, an organization that promotes financial inclusion. And IFINA actually invests quite a bit in primary data collection about financial behaviors, financial inclusion, going out, knocking on doors, speaking with Nigerians who aren't already part of the, some of whom aren't already part of the financial digital ecosystem. But that project, very valuable. Every bank and fintech I ever spoke with said they use IFINA data. But it was funded by donors, by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and UK aid historically, because of that problem. It can be difficult sometimes for private, because it's a bit of that tragedy of the commons. You know, good quality data everybody loves, but it is expensive in some cases to generate. And difficult. A few things I would say is, one, I do think private sector can be more organized. And in the technology and innovation space, in financial sector, just across the board, we can come together as, now I'm in a private sector institution, so I say we can come together and recognize we need this value for all of us. Here are ways we organize ourselves and partner and collaborate to collect the data. So that would be one. I would say number two is that we can really innovate around primary data collection. So for example, we've worked with innovators at Semicolon and through our Semicolon Ventures and startup training programs who are really doing interesting things with, let's say you call it IoT, Internet of Things devices, that maybe farmers put in their soil and they're measuring soil data, composition, rainfall. I don't know enough of the specifics, but it's capturing data, right? We have geospatial data. I know that NIGECOMSAT is trying to work with innovators more to actually leverage the satellites we already have. How do we use that satellite data for more effective innovation? So I also think that there's space for innovators to work not only on solutions that use data and apply data, but also they can innovate around that good quality primary data collection. And perhaps, so there will be a commercial incentive and benefit, which makes it easier for it to enter the market. And hopefully we can work collaboratively around the joint sort of management and sharing of that data. We already know NDPA, the Nigeria Data Protection Act, specifies that for personal data, for us as individuals, we own our own data. And that enables things like open banking, open finance solutions, because doesn't matter what bank I use, my transaction history is my transaction history. And now that there are rules and frameworks around that data being shared, it means that I can use the transaction history with a bank. I can tell the bank, look, you need to make my data available to this fintech that wants to give me a loan. And the fintech can now use AI and other tools to make informed lending decisions and give me appropriate amount of credit.
Yeah, well, it sounds like with, I think what you started at first, that the private sector needs to be organized. Yeah. And whether it's to gather the data or the sharing or the usage of the data, there needs to be communication and a handshake between different sectors. So, well, I hope somebody will spearhead that and take it up. But thank you.
We're trying.
Thank you so much, Ashley Emmanuel, Chief Operating Officer, Semicolon Africa, for your time, spending a bit of your holiday with us.
Yes, thank you. It's okay. We'll go to eat ram after this.
Ah, okay, great.
I hope you get a break too.
I'm sure there's a lot of pepper.
Definitely.
You can stand that.
Of course now. My name is actually Oluwakemi. Yes.
All right. Thank you so much, Ashley, for your time. And
Thanks a lot. Pleasure to be here. Thanks.
All right, let's take a break now. When we come back, I have just for you from Abidjan. That's after the break here on Business Morning. Please stay with us. back. It's still Business Morning here on Channels Television. Last week, I was in Abidjan in Côte d'Ivoire, and the story was all about the African Development Bank Group. And the new president was elected. Series of meetings held. The theme was making Africa's capital work better for Africa's development. Well, I put this package together, capturing some of the high points and important discussions that was held in Abidjan last week, and I decided to share it with you today. The venue of the 2025 African Development Bank Group meetings in Abidjan has all the colors and insignia. Over 5,000 delegates are attending to discuss the theme, making Africa's capital work better for Africa's development. And at the peak of the meeting is the election of a new president for the group.
I see the impact of our work in supporting Africa to avoid a looming food crisis predicted.
The outgoing president, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, begins the series with President's Media Welcome Breakfast. Here, he shares the achievement of the group during his 10 years as the leader, top of which is the capital increase from $93 billion to $350 billion between 2015 and 2025. Beyond the numbers, Dr. Adesina believes this has been impactful.
The COVID-19 to geopolitical tensions emanating from the Russian war in Ukraine, which in turn triggered a global food crisis. At the same time, a global debt crisis and devastating climate change pose untold hardships and challenges. In the midst of this polycrisis, your bank, the African Development Bank Group, strongly supported by its shareholders, stood strong and innovatively supported Africa as it navigated each crisis. Africa survived.
This opens up conversations at the various meetings on different but related themes, which include high-level presidential dialogue, making Africa's capital work better for Africa's development. There's also the launch of the 2025 African Economic Outlook Report.
We're paying more to access finance. We don't have enough in terms of fiscal capital, but if you look at fiscal financial flows out of the continent every year, we're losing more than 3 times the resources that Africa gets in terms of financial outflows. Here, just because of poor risk ratings that I've talked about, we lose about $74 billion US. Illicit financial flows, the continent loses about $90 billion US. Corruption costs the continent $148 billion US. And international profit shifting, base erosion and profit shifting is costing Africa about $275 billion US. When you sum only that up, we have $587 billion US leaving the shores of this continent every year.
APRM on credit rating agencies. An Africa Credit Rating Agency, key to Africa's financial independence. African Union Commission, innovating financing for inclusive growth and sustainable development, and the strategic role of African Capital Market and the Africa Credit Rating Agency.
It is less about trying to challenge the credit rating agencies through arbitrary criticisms, but more about trying to build the capacity and capabilities of countries and government to be able to negotiate and have a frank conversation with credit rating agencies. I think this is the approach that we think is excellent. We think that it is going to, over time, it's not going to be immediate, it's going to be incremental. Over time, it is going to alter the methodology. And as we think about the establishment of the African Credit Rating Agency, I think UNDP would like to work very closely with the African Union to ensure that we are not just, it's not about radically transforming the methodology, but it's also about building the capacities of our countries.
Leveraging Africa's capital for development amidst increased economic challenges is also another session.
But something in the magnitude of $28 billion is expected to flow to Nigeria this year from the diaspora. That is very significant. That dwarfs all receipts in bad years when it comes to oil. Now we need to tap into that as we think about even the capital markets. And there is an initiative the central bank, which we're helping them work upon, but this should be something across the continent, and they'll be more disposed to longer-term investments within the country just because they're from the continent.
but all the plans is hinged on energy, fossil fuel or renewables.
In many areas, it's leapfrogging what is happening in other regions, particularly when it comes to energy transition. Energy transition hasn't been mentioned so far, and Africa is absolutely end-to-end at the core of that mega trend that is going and is reshaping entire economies, like in the Middle East and sectors. Why end-to-end? We talked about minerals previously. There's also renewable energies, the electrification of the economy, and ultimately being able to provide cheaper, more affordable services.
And all through these meetings, the steering committee of the Board of Governors for the election of the president of the African Development Group were holding closed-door sessions. The result, the group's 9th president-elect, Sidi Ould of Mauritania, is elected by the bank's Board of Governors, comprising finance and economy ministers or central bank governors of the bank group's 81 regional and non-regional member countries. The board is the highest decision-making authority for the bank group. Mr. Tar brings over 35 years of experience in African and international finance. He served as president of the Arab Bank for Economic Development in Africa for 10 years, from 2015.
Now let us go to work. I am ready.
But before he takes over in September, Dr. Adesina continues his message of One Africa, a message which those who have worked closely with him believe he has anchored well.
Akin brought uncommon passion to his work and made a difference to the lives of farmers in the country. When His Excellency President Goodluck Jonathan nominated him as candidate for the presidency of the African Development Bank, it was with determination that I took on the role of his campaign manager in my capacity as Nigeria's finance minister and Nigeria's governor for the African Development Bank. We campaigned hard, and his performance in the interview was tops, and he got elected. I'm pleased to say that as president, he has not disappointed. He's leaving a strong legacy behind, of which he, Nigerians and all Africans, should be proud.
You have brought vision, energy, and relentless determination to the job, and it's been an absolute privilege to learn from and work alongside you. I think our personal relationship, which started when I came to visit you when I was just a candidate for the job, helped to lay the groundwork for a renewed and stronger partnership between our two institutions. But friendship alone is not a strategy, and we both knew that. What I think we've really built over the past year is a new way of working. We're focused on impact. We're grounded in mutual respect. But most importantly, we're committed to the future of Africa and its young people and their desire for a better life. M300 is a clear example. It's a shared ambition to bring energy to 300 million people in Africa, a demonstration of what's possible when the MDBs work like a system. We each play to our strengths, but we're very aligned on the outcome. I think we've made real progress in a short time. But the eyes of the world are upon us. Some are skeptical, some are inspired. And to meet that moment, we need to keep that momentum going. And that means more countries finalizing their compacts and for those that have, move quickly from words to action.
He promises to keep the light of Africa burning even when he ceases to be president of
Ladies
EFDB.
and gentlemen, as we look now to the future, let us continue to support Africa. Let us make sure that our anchor holds even on tempestuous seas. Let us continue to sow the seeds for a better day, today and tomorrow for Africa. For I can assure you that your labors will not be in vain. Do not stop giving. Together, let us make the world a better place. Together, let's advance Africa's transformation. As shareholders, we have been together for 60 years. I urge you to stay together and support together. Differences may exist, priorities may change, but around Africa, let us unite.
Dr. Adesina's presidency will also be remembered for his love for singing.
I can see clearly now the rain is gone. I can see all obstacles in our way. Gone at the black cloud, the host of light. Yes, it's gonna be a bright, bright, sunshiny day. It's gonna be a bright, bright, sunshiny day. Thank you, and God bless you all. Bye.
Yes, I guess I should also clap for Dr. Adesina. Served for 10 years and finds a way to bring the fun out of it while doing his work, has been attested to there by very important personalities in the world. Congratulations to him for serving 10 years, serving Africa. And we look forward to what he's going to do next. I wonder if he's going to be singing. We'll see about that. Well, let's get back to our business here. Let's do global news and find out what President Trump is doing next. And I'm sure you have not missed what's going on between President Trump and his very close friend, Elon Musk. Well, U.S. President Donald Trump yesterday, Thursday, called Tesla CEO Elon Musk crazy and threatened to cut his company's government contracts as the two men filled over a major tax bill. In response, Musk has said SpaceX will begin decommissioning its Dragon spacecraft immediately. Without him, he says, Trump would have lost the election. And Musk added later, shares of Tesla, we see, sank more than 14% and shed $152 billion in value from the electric vehicle maker. Meanwhile, Elon Musk and President Trump may be meeting today, Friday, after the two indirectly sniped at each other over that disagreement about the president's big, beautiful bill, which may be biting hard to Nigeria also. Well, Mr. Musk called for Trump's impeachment as their feud entered a new explosive level. The two men began launching insults at each other on Thursday as the president lashed out at his former advisor over criticism of the primary legislation furthering his agenda. And yes, connected to that, investors sold off shares in Tesla on Thursday as tensions erupted between both men, that's the boss, Elon Musk, and U.S. President. Shares in electric car company dropped by 14%, wiping out about $150 billion in market value in one of the worst days in months. The losses were an indication of what might be at stake for Musk as he breaks with the White House, known for wielding the power of government against what he sees as enemies. As the disputes devolve, President Trump, I told you earlier, has threatened to cut government contracts, including the rocket firm SpaceX, which has contracts worth tens of billions of dollars with the government. Last month, the head of Tesla's board was forced to publicly deny a report that the company had started to look for someone else to lead the firm, when Musk is too busy with the government issue. Well, Musk pledged on an investor call that he would be stepping back from his role leading Doge, and had prompted an upswing in the stock. He formally left the government at the end of last month. Now, President Trump's trade war is taking a bite on Canada's economy. In April, Canada's monthly trade deficit in goods hit $7.1 billion. That's the highest level ever, as exports plunged in the wake of U.S. tariffs. And economists and industry leaders are warning the numbers are likely to get worse in the coming months. In a report after the data was released by Statistics Canada, National Bank economist Jocelyn Pickett is noting that exports to non-U.S. markets rose 2.9% to $18.3 billion, and that it wasn't nearly enough to offset the 15.7% plunge in exports to the United States compared to the previous month. April was the first full month of tariffs between Canada and the U.S. and saw the implementation of tariffs on all two sectors. Sectors hit hardest by tariffs saw the biggest drops in exports, with 34.5% fall in raw aluminum and 22.9% drop in passenger vehicles, with lumber recording 15.9%, as well as raw iron and steel 14.1% also falling. Earlier this week, Trump had signed an executive order doubling the tariff on steel and aluminum imports to 50%. The Australian share market has slipped again after approaching its best ever close, fading ahead of key U.S. economic data and a long weekend in most Australian states. The S&P AX 200 traded a tight range on Friday to finish 23.2 points low, and that's down 0.2% to 8,515.7, as the broader all ordinaries slipped 26.7 points, that's about 0.3%, to 8,741.9. The top 200 gained roughly 1% for the week, but failed to hold above its record close of 8,555.8 for a second straight day, as investors took profits ahead of a trading break on Monday and two potential volatile U.S. sessions before the next AX Open. With the local bourse so close to its record, some investors were asking if they were looking at a high watermark, and 9 of 11 local sectors finished lower, but energy shares offered some relief. It was up about 0.7%, as hopes of resumed U.S.-China trade talks pushed oil prices higher. From there, we move to India, where the central bank has lowered interest rates by a deeper than expected 0.5%, the third quarter in a row amid falling inflation and lower growth in Asia's third largest economy. The repo rate now stands at 5.5%, that's the lowest in 3 years, and this is the level at which the central bank lends money to commercial banks, influencing borrowing costs for home and car loans. Explaining the rationale for the cuts, RBI Governor Sanjay Malhotra said growth is lower than our aspirations, and the bank felt it was imperative to stimulate domestic consumption and investment amid rising global uncertainties. The rate cut comes on the back of two previous reductions in April and February. Data released last week shows that India's economy grew by 6.5% in the previous financial year ending March. The country remains the world's fastest expanding major economy, although growth has sharply dropped from the 9.2% high record in financial year 2023-2024. Meanwhile, retail prices in India have slowed faster than expected to 3.16% in April, and that's the lowest in 6 years and below the RBI's 4% target. It's driven by falling food prices. Lower borrowing costs could have a positive growth impact due to improved purchasing power for households, lower input costs for companies, and lower debt servicing costs for the government. From India to Germany, where industrial sector activity fell more than expected in April. This is according to latest data published by Distatis. In the Eurozone's economic powerhouse, industrial output dropped 1.4% month on month. The Federal Statistics Authority said this adjusted for seasonal and calendar effects against the expected 1% decrease and a revised 2.3% growth reported in March. German industrial production dropped 1.8% year-on-year in April versus March's 0.7% revision. And let's head to Hungary, there where retail sales surged at the start of the second quarter, making shoppers Prime Minister Viktor Orban's bet to avoid another recession less than a year before elections. While store receipts rose, an annual workday adjusted 5% in April. That's the most since May 2022, according to data published by Budapest-based statistics office. Industrial output, meantime, dropped for a 14th consecutive month, falling a workday adjusted annual 2.3% in April after a 5.4% drop in March. Still talking retail sales in Italy, it increased at a faster than expected pace in April after falling in the previous month. This is according to the statistics office, Istat. The sales value rose 0.7% on a monthly basis, reversing a 0.4% decrease in March. Sales were expected to rise by 0.2%. Retail sales of food goods grew 1.3% in April after falling 0.4% in the prior month. Non-food sales rebounded 0.2%. That's again 0.3% fall in March. On an annual basis, retail sales recovered strongly by 3.7% in April after a 2.7% decline in the previous month, and 8.6% surge in food sales boosted the overall higher demand. Well, on a down day for the market, Microsoft reached a record high for the first time in 11 months. Shares of the software giants rose 0.8% to close at $467.68. Microsoft has once again reclaimed the title of world's largest company by market cap, with a valuation of $3.48 trillion. Nvidia has a market cap of 3.42, and Apple is valued at $3 trillion. So Microsoft last recorded a record close in July 2024, and the stock is now up 11% for the year, while Nasdaq is flat. Tech stocks broadly dropped on Thursday, led by a plunge in Tesla, which we talked about earlier, as the CEO there and President Donald Trump, I would say, escalation of their argument there. And Musk, who was the leading Trump administration's Department of Government Efficiency DOGE until last week, has slapped the Trump-backed spending bill, making its way through Congress as part that has turned public. All right, while we do, I think the other one is Binance executive who was detained in Nigeria. He is Binance Heads Limited. He was the head of finance crime compliance, Tigran Gabarian. We hear he has now resigned, leaving the world's largest crypto exchange. We do not have more details about this. Remember, he was released on humanitarian grounds in October after his health deteriorated while in jail. The former U.S. Internal Revenue Service agent who was joined Binance in 2021 has been held on allegation of money laundering and currency manipulation when he was traveling to Nigeria on behalf of Binance. So we do not have more information about that, but we hear he's leaving the exchange. Well, I cannot close without telling you the good news in case you missed it yesterday. The market, Nigeria's domestic stock market, was on fire yesterday. Gained over 1 trillion naira. So if you're an investor there, that means you made a lot of money. And the holiday, you'll be smiling. That's if you're able to get some profit. The market was up more than 1%, 1.63%, over 1 trillion naira to close at 72.27 trillion naira for the market cap. It's a holiday, so you can't access the money now. So we'll open with this on Tuesday, and then we'll see what investors will do with that big profit that was made on the markets. It's a holiday. Go out there and do have fun. I'll be here giving you all the economic and business information that you need. That's why I'll be back here at 1 p.m. for Business Incorporated. I'm John McQuarrie. Talk to you later.